My name is Claire Bennett, and for 7 years my brother introduced me to people the same way. This is my sister Claire, she still rents. He always paused after the word rents. Just long enough for people to laugh, just long enough for me to feel like I was 14 again. The strange thing is that I never corrected him, not once. I never told him what I actually did. I never told him where my money went. And I definitely never told him who owned the building he proudly called home. If you're wondering why I stayed quiet for so long, that's fair. I used to wonder the same thing, but some truths are worth waiting for, especially when the people mocking you are building their entire identity on a lie. The night everything changed started at my mother's 62nd birthday dinner. 30 relatives, a private room, white tablecloths, expensive wine. And my brother performing for an audience the way he always did. Claire still lives in that tiny apartment downtown, he announced. A few cousins laughed, my mother smiled nervously. My father stared at his plate. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever did. My brother Ethan had been the favorite child for as long as I could remember. When he got a B in school, my parents celebrated his effort. When I got straight A's, they asked why one score wasn't higher. When Ethan started a business that failed, they called him ambitious. When I bought my first investment property at 26, they called me lucky. Families don't always pick favorites on purpose. Sometimes they do it so consistently that nobody even notices anymore. Including the favorite, especially the favorite. Ethan lived in a luxury apartment building overlooking the river. He loved that building, talked about it constantly. The rooftop pool, the gym. The concierge, the views, every conversation somehow returned to his apartment. My building has this, my building has that, my building is incredible. He said my building the way kings say my kingdom. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so exhausting. Because every month his rent payment went to an LLC, and that LLC belonged to me, not directly, not publicly, but legally, completely. The building had become mine 3 years earlier through a quiet acquisition nobody in my family knew about. Not my parents, not my brother, not even my closest cousins. I preferred it that way. Money attracts attention, secrets attract peace, or at least that's what I told myself. The truth was simpler. I was tired of proving myself, tired of explaining myself. Tired of chasing approval that never arrived, so I stopped. I built companies quietly, bought properties quietly, made investments quietly, and let everyone believe whatever made them comfortable. For years it worked, until Ethan decided comfort wasn't enough. He wanted superiority. The first sign came 6 months before my mother's birthday dinner. My phone rang during a meeting. Ethan. I almost ignored it, almost. Claire, he said, need a favor. Of course he did. Nobody in my family ever called me for advice, they called me for solutions. There's an opportunity, he continued. An investment? Whenever someone says opportunity before asking for money, prepare yourself. He needed a loan, not from a bank, from me, $200,000, I nearly laughed. Not because I couldn't afford it, because of the confidence, the entitlement, the certainty that I would say yes. When I asked why the bank wouldn't lend it, he became vague. Whenever people become vague around money, the truth is usually expensive. I declined, politely, firmly. The conversation ended badly. The family version began immediately. Within a week, I was hearing from relatives. Ethan says you wouldn't help. Family should support family. You know he's under pressure. Nobody asked why he needed the money. Nobody asked why I said no. They only cared that I had disappointed the golden child. Again, the pressure built for months. Then came the birthday dinner, the night Ethan finally pushed too far. Halfway through dessert, he stood to make a toast. That should have worried me. Anytime Ethan stood up voluntarily, trouble followed. He thanked my mother, praised my father, talked about family. Then his eyes landed on me. Some people, he said, smiling, still haven't figured out adulthood. The room went quiet. I knew what was coming. Everyone did. 40 years old and still renting? Laughter. Imagine that. More laughter. He raised his glass. I guess some people build lives and some people just borrow them. The room erupted. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't smile. I didn't laugh, I didn't look away, I just watched him. Because something had happened that afternoon, something nobody else knew. The property management company had sent me a report, a routine report, except for one detail. Apartment 1904, Ethan Bennett, 3 months behind on rent, not 1 month, not 2, 3. The man humiliating me for renting wasn't paying his own rent. To me, and sitting there listening to him perform, I realized something. The joke wasn't funny anymore, not because it hurt. Because it was over. Ethan didn't know it yet, my parents didn't know it yet, but the next morning a notice was scheduled to be delivered. A legal notice. The kind printed on expensive paper. The kind that changes family conversations forever. I lifted my glass, smiled, and said the only thing that came to mind. "Enjoy your evening, Ethan," he grinned, certain he'd won. Certain everyone agreed with him, certain I was still the same sister he'd mocked for years. He had no idea that by this time tomorrow, he'd be standing in the lobby of his luxury building staring at a document with my name on it. And he had absolutely no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I was already at my office when my phone started vibrating. 8:32, Ethan, I let it ring. 8:33, again. 8:34, again. By the fourth call, I knew the notice had arrived. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello, Claire." His voice was tight, controlled. The way people sound when they're trying very hard not to panic. "Can you talk?" I leaned back in my chair. "Sure." There was a pause. "I got something today. I see. An eviction notice." Another pause, longer this time, as if he expected me to react. I didn't, because none of this was surprising. 3 months earlier, Ethan had stopped paying rent. Not because he couldn't, because he thought he shouldn't have to. The property manager had documented everything. Late notices, emails. Payment plans, ignored calls, ignored letters, ignored warnings. My brother had spent years convincing himself that rules existed for other people. Eventually, reality sends a bill. "I think there must be some mistake," he said. "Is there?" "Of course there is." I looked out my office window at the city below. "Then I'm sure they'll fix it." His breathing changed, faster. More irritated. "You don't understand." "No, this could affect my credit." I almost smiled. The same credit he'd wanted me to risk 6 months earlier. The same credit he'd expected me to sacrifice for him. Funny how important consequences become when they belong to you. "Then you should probably handle it quickly." Claire, there it was. The voice, the one he used when he wanted something. "I need help." For a moment I said nothing, not because I was angry, because I was tired. Tired of being useful only when things fell apart. Tired of existing as an emergency contact instead of a person. "You remember the loan?" I asked. Silence. "You said no." "I did. You embarrassed me." I laughed softly. Interesting choice of words. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. But it wasn't nothing, because Ethan had embarrassed himself, and somehow I'd been assigned responsibility for it. Just like always, the call ended badly. Again, 2 hours later my mother called, then my father, then my aunt. The family response machine had activated. Apparently Ethan was under enormous stress. Apparently landlords were unreasonable. Apparently family should help family. Nobody seemed interested in the fact that family should also pay rent. That weekend, my parents invited everyone to dinner. When my family says invited, they mean expected, so I went. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. The same porch, the same flower beds, the same sense that time moved differently there. Inside, relatives filled the rooms. Children ran through hallways. My mother carried trays of food, and Ethan stood in the center of everything acting like a victim. By dessert, the conversation turned exactly where I knew it would. "Ethan's having a rough time," my mother said. Translation, "Prepare yourself." My father cleared his throat. "You know, Claire, sometimes people need support." There it was, the setup, the family intervention. Only nobody had informed me beforehand, which meant they assumed I'd simply cooperate, again. "What kind of support?" I asked. My father exchanged a glance with Ethan, then Ethan pushed a folder across the table, a folder, an actual folder. I opened it. loan documents, co-signing paperwork. My name highlighted in yellow. For a moment, I genuinely admired the confidence. The man couldn't pay rent, but wanted me to guarantee a six-figure loan. Incredible. You've got to be kidding. Nobody laughed because nobody thought it was a joke. It's temporary, Ethan said. Of course it is. Once business picks up, business hasn't picked up in 4 years. His face darkened. See. That's what you do? What? You act like you're smarter than everyone. The room became very quiet. I looked around the table, my mother, my father, my cousins, waiting, watching, expecting. And suddenly I understood something. This wasn't about money, it never had been, it was about obedience. If I signed, I'd prove I still knew my place. If I refused, I became the problem. Again. I closed the folder. No, my father sat forward. Claire. No, listen. No, my voice remained calm. That made it worse. People can argue with anger. Calm feels permanent. Ethan stood up. You think you're better than us. There it was, the family accusation, the oldest one. I shook my head. No, Ethan, then why? Because I read documents before signing them. A few cousins looked down, trying not to smile. Ethan saw it. His face turned red. You know what your problem is? I already knew. I'd heard every version, but he continued anyway. You rent a tiny apartment and think you're some financial genius. The room went silent again. He was smiling now, confident, performing. Meanwhile, I've actually built something. I stared at him. Built something. The man was 3 months behind on rent. Is that right? Absolutely. My father nodded proudly. My mother looked relieved. The favorite child was winning again. Then Ethan delivered the sentence that changed everything. If I owned property like you pretend to understand, maybe I'd listen. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no embarrassment, no hurt. Just distance, because sitting across from me was a man living inside a building I owned. A building he hadn't paid rent on for 3 months. A building he'd spent years bragging about. A building he believed belonged to someone else. The irony was becoming almost too large to carry. I pushed back my chair, picked up my purse, and stood. Where are you going? My father asked. Home, the word hung there. Home. Ethan laughed. Back to your apartment? I smiled, small, calm, different. Yes. Then I looked directly at him. And Ethan, what? Be careful with paperwork. His smile faded slightly, only slightly, not enough, not yet, because some lessons arrive slowly. And some truths need one more day before they become impossible to ignore. The official deadline on his notice expired in 48 hours. And Monday morning was coming fast. Monday morning arrived quietly. Too quietly. No calls, no messages, no family drama. That kind of silence usually means something is about to break. I was already in my office when my assistant told me someone was downstairs insisting on seeing me. No appointment, no name needed. I already knew who it was, Ethan. When he walked in, he didn't look like the same person from dinner. No confidence, no performance, just irritation mixed with panic. The kind that comes when control starts slipping. Claire, he said quickly, we need to fix this. I closed my laptop. I thought you said there was no mistake. His jaw tightened. That's not the point. What is the point? He hesitated. For the first time, he didn't have a prepared answer. I spoke to management, he continued. They're saying I'm behind on rent. That's impossible. Is it? Yes, I leaned back. Interesting, he stepped closer. Claire, just tell them to cancel it. There it was again, the assumption that I could simply fix reality for him. Like I had been doing my whole life without him even noticing. I can't cancel reality, Ethan, he exhaled sharply. This is serious. Yes, silence. Then he added, they said something else too. I already knew what was coming, but I let him say it. They said the building is owned by an LLC. Yes, and that LLC is, he stopped. For the first time, his confidence cracked. What? I asked. He swallowed. Yours. The word landed differently in the room, not loud, not dramatic, just final. I nodded once. Yes, for a few seconds he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak. It was like his mind was trying to undo what his ears had already accepted. That's not possible, he finally said. It is, you rent an apartment? I did. He stared at me, then laughed, a short, broken sound. No, no, you don't understand. I live there. That building is mine. The room went still. Even the air felt heavier. Ethan shook his head. You're lying. I opened my laptop and turned it around. Property records, deed transfers, LLC ownership documents. All clean, all legal, all mine. His eyes scanned the screen, slower and slower, as the truth stopped being optional. This has to be a mistake. It is. He stepped back slightly, like the floor had shifted. No, he said again, softer now. You can't own that building. Why not? Because I would know. That line almost made me smile, because that was the entire problem. He never thought to check. He never thought to ask. He never thought I could exist outside of his version of me. The sister who rented, the sister who didn't understand success, the sister he could laugh at in front of family dinners. Now he couldn't even look at me. My assistant quietly placed another folder on my desk. I slid it toward him. What's this? He asked. Your account summary. He didn't touch it, so I continued. 3 months unpaid rent, late fees. Violation notices, final eviction processing. His breathing changed, faster again. This is my home, he said quickly. No, I replied, it's my property. A long silence followed. Then he whispered, why didn't you tell me? That question. Finally, I stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the city I had spent years building pieces of. Because you never asked, I said. Behind me, I heard him sit down, slowly, like his body had given up before his mind did. I didn't do this to hurt you, I added, a pause. I did this because I was tired of being small in a place I owned. Silence again, longer this time. When I turned back, he looked different, not angry anymore, not mocking, just empty. What happens now? He asked quietly. I picked up my keys, the same feeling I had in every deal I ever closed. Clarity. Now you move out, I said simply. And Ethan, he looked up. This time, no one's going to laugh at me for it. I walked past him toward the door. At the entrance, I paused, not to look back, but to say the words exactly the way they were meant to land. My brother mocked me for renting an apartment until he learned I owned the building he lived in. Then I left.